He thought it was just another walk through the woods, a quiet moment to gather firewood and clear his thoughts. But what Caleb Hart found beneath those ancient pine trees, amidst an unnerving predatory stillness, would irrevocably alter not only his life, but the lives of two little girls who had already lost far too much. This is a story about courage that seeks no spotlight, kindness that knows no bounds, the kind of love that asks for nothing but gives everything in return. If stories like this resonate deep within your heart, we warmly invite you to subscribe to the channel. There's always room here for one more soul who believes in the enduring power of second chances. Now let me take you back to the day when everything changed. The late afternoon sun draped the forest in shades of amber and molten gold, filtering softly through the dense canopy like light through ancient stained glass. A crisp breeze whispered secrets through the tall pines, rustling the leaves that hadn't yet surrendered to the approaching grip of autumn. Caleb Hart adjusted the straps on his worn canvas backpack and took a deep breath, the scent of pine and damp earth filling his lungs. Usually a comfort, but today strangely unsettling. The woods had always been his sanctuary, his place of quiet, of healing, of remembering Claire. He moved with practiced care, eyes scanning the forest floor for dry, straight branches. The old wood stove in his cabin could be temperamental, and his son Nathan always swore the firewood from this particular ridge smelled like warm pancakes. Caleb smiled faintly at the thought. 10 years old, and Nathan still held on to a belief in everyday magic. As he knelt beside a patch of moss-covered earth, a chill deeper than the autumn air traced its way down his spine. Something was profoundly wrong. The usual chorus of woodland creatures, the chattering squirrels, the flitting chickadees, the rustle of unseen deer, was unnervingly silent. Then a sound, barely perceptible, but unmistakably human. A cry, faint, fractured, like someone had been weeping for so long they'd forgotten how to stop or were too terrified to make more noise. He froze, every sense heightened, a primal instinct screaming danger. He noticed fresh, hastily made boot prints near a game trail, heavier than any deer, leading deeper into the thicket. Not his prints. And then a glint of something metallic, half buried in the leaves. A discarded energy bar wrapper, not the kind hikers usually carried around here. The brand was expensive, imported. Another sound followed, more desperate, more urgent, quickly stifled as if by a cruel hand. Just as he dropped the bundle of sticks in his arms, his heart suddenly a cold stone in his chest. A twig snapped sharply behind him. Caleb spun, every muscle tensed, his woodsman's instincts flaring. He caught a fleeting glimpse of a dark shape, a man's silhouette melting back into the deeper shadows of the undergrowth, moving with a sinister stealth that wasn't native to these woods. He's close. He's still here. Adrenaline surged sharp and metallic on his tongue. There was no time to be cautious, no time to retreat and call for help. Whoever that was, they were the source of this terror. He moved silently, quickly toward the source of the cries, his own heart thudding a frantic rhythm. His boots, usually quiet on the damp forest floor, now seemed to whisper urgent secrets to the fallen leaves. The instincts kicked in, not merely those of a woodsman, but those of a father, sharpened by a loss that still ached with a persistent, dull throb. The cries led him down a narrow, overgrown path, half hidden by dense thickets and long shadows. He pushed through sharp branches, his worn shirt catching on thorns, until the trail widened slightly. And then he saw them. Two little girls, tied with cruel efficiency to a massive, indifferent oak tree. They couldn't have been more than 7. Identical. Long dark hair matted with leaves, pale cheeks streaked with dirt and dried tears. Their wrists were raw and bleeding, bound tightly with thick, unforgiving rope. Their simple cotton dresses torn, their small feet bare, bruised and caked with mud. One girl, her eyes wide with terror, clung to the other, trying to shield her with the last shred of her failing strength. The other girl's breathing was shallow, a tiny rasping sound. Caleb's breath hitched in his throat. They're still here, whoever did this. The thought was a sliver of ice in his veins, urging speed, demanding action, before the fleeting shadow he'd seen could return. My God, he whispered the sound, barely escaping his lips. The girls flinched violently, shrinking back against the unforgiving bark like startled fawns. Hey, he said gently, his voice low and soothing, holding his hands up, palms open to show he was unarmed. It's okay. I'm here to help. You're safe now. He kept his ears strained, listening for any sound of the watcher returning. The older of the two, her eyes like shadowed pools, blinked at him. Her lips trembled, but she didn't speak, only tightened her protective embrace around her sister, who let out a small, painful whimper. I'm going to get you out of here, Caleb said, crouching down slowly, his gaze unwavering. He pulled out his pocket knife, the familiar weight, a small comfort, flipping it open, with fingers that trembled despite his resolve. Every snap of a distant twig, every rustle of leaves sounded like the approaching footsteps of a monster. I promise no one's going to hurt you again. The proximity to the crude knots in the rope sent a fresh wave of revulsion through him. He's close. Gotta be fast. He worked at the ropes with meticulous care, his fingers racing every fiber of his being, humming with a desperate urgency. Whoever had done this might be watching, might be circling back. Why out here so deep in the unforgiving woods? He pushed the chilling thoughts away. First things first, get the girls free. The rope, coarse and biting, finally gave way, with a dull snap, and the girls collapsed into his arms like broken birds, their small bodies radiating a chilling cold. They didn't speak, didn't ask who he was, just held on to him, like he was the last bastion of warmth in a freezing, terrifying world. My name's Caleb, he murmured, his voice thick with unshed tears. You don't have to talk right now. I'm going to carry you home. You'll be warm soon. You'll be safe. The older girl managed a barely perceptible nod against his shoulder, but it was enough. Caleb shrugged off his worn jacket, the scent of wood smoke and familiarity clinging to it, and wrapped it around their trembling small bodies, and then lifted them both carefully into his arms. The younger one was alarmingly limp. He cast one last wary glance back into the shadowed woods, expecting to see that dark figure emerge, but saw nothing. For now. Their collective weight was nothing compared to the crushing fear that pressed against his ribs like a vice of ice. The closest road was a good 40-minute hike, maybe more, over challenging terrain. He didn't care. He just walked, pushing himself faster than he thought possible. Every branch that snapped underfoot sounded like a gunshot in the profound, watchful silence of the forest. He kept his eyes scanning the trail, his ears straining for any sound of pursuit, his mind replaying the sight of those fresh boot prints, that fleeting shadow. Halfway down the ridge, as the path grew steeper, the younger girl whimpered in his arms, her breathing still alarmingly shallow. Caleb glanced down, his heart constricting. Are you okay, sweetheart? She looked up at him with wide, glassy eyes, her voice barely a breath. Are you the angel? His throat tightened. No, sweetheart, he said softly, his voice rough with emotion. Just a man. She nodded, her eyelids fluttering closed. You're warm. Like an angel. Caleb swallowed hard, a fresh wave of determination surging through him. He pushed on images of Claire's gentle smile, mixing with the terrified faces of these children. He wouldn't fail them. By the time he reached the ranger station on the edge of Glen Ridge, the sun had slipped completely below the horizon, and the sky was painted in hues of bruised purples and fading, reluctant gold. Sheriff Grant was already there, leaning against his dusty squad car with a thermos in hand, looking like he'd been expecting a long, uneventful night. When he saw Caleb emerging from the twilight, struggling under his precious burden, his brow furrowed in confusion, then alarm. What in God's name? Grant's voice dropped as he rushed over his usual gruffness, replaced by shock. Are they? They're alive, Caleb said, his voice hoarse and ragged. But they've been through hell. One of them, she's not doing well. He relayed the glimpse of the man, the sense of being watched. Grant's face hardened. Paramedics summoned by a hiker who'd seen Caleb's frantic pace from a distance and called it in, swept in with practiced efficiency, lifting the girls gently onto stretchers. Caleb didn't let go until the last possible second, his hand lingering on a small, cold arm. As the ambulance sirens, now wailing into the night, pulled away towards the county hospital, Grant put a heavy hand on Caleb's shoulder. Where'd you find them, Caleb? Deep in South Ridge. Caleb said, his body finally starting to register the bone-deep exhaustion. About a mile, maybe more, past the old timberline. Tied up. Someone left them there to die. I think I saw him, Grant. Or at least someone who didn't belong. Grant let out a slow, disbelieving whistle. That far out, and you saw someone? Damn it, what the hell were they doing way up there? He stopped, a horrifying realization dawning in his eyes. Wait, you said they... Twins? Caleb nodded, weariness washing over him. Identical. Maybe 7 years old. The sheriff stiffened his face, going pale under the flickering station lights. His eyes darted to his radio. Sweet Lord, he muttered, and then clicked the mic with a shaking hand. Dispatch, this is Unit 2. We may have found the Lane twins. Repeat, possible recovery of the Lane twins. Caleb Hart reported a suspicious individual near the scene. Advise all units to be on alert in the Glen Ridge area. Send backup to my location and notify Fairhaven PD, highest priority. Caleb blinked, the name unfamiliar in his exhaustion. Lane. Grant turned, his face a mask of shock and grim understanding. Aurora Lane. Caleb. You haven't seen the news? Her daughters Eloise and Evie were abducted 5 days ago from her estate in Fairhaven. Half the damn state's been searching. The FBI, everyone. Caleb's knees almost buckled. He had just walked out of the woods with the children of one of the richest, most reclusive women in America. And possibly the man who had put them there was still prowling his woods. But in that moment, standing under the vast, indifferent sky, none of that mattered. They were alive. That was all. The morning broke slowly over Glen Ridge, brushing the rooftops of the sleepy town in hues of delicate gold and apricot. The familiar scent of coffee drifted through old screen doors, mingling with the crackle of radio static and the defiant song of late-season birds. It should have been an ordinary day. But nothing about Glen Ridge felt ordinary anymore. Not after what Caleb Hart had carried bruised and broken out of the deepening woods the night before. By mid-morning, the news had spread like wildfire. People murmured the same words, disbelief warring with a fierce local pride. Caleb Hart found them, the Lane girls, in our woods. God help him. He carried them all the way down. Some hailed him as a hero. Others, more pragmatic, said he was lucky the kidnapper hadn't returned. But everyone agreed something sacred had happened. Caleb sat alone in his kitchen, hands, scratched and raw, wrapped around a chipped blue mug. His right arm ached. His legs felt like lead, but it was the silence that weighed on him. His son Nathan had mercifully stayed at a friend's. Thank God. Caleb couldn't bear the thought of Nathan seeing those girls as he had first found them. A hesitant knock. Sheriff Grant stood on the porch looking exhausted. Morning, Caleb, Grant said, holding up a box of pastries. Figured you hadn't eaten. Or slept. Caleb managed a ghost of a smile. Right on both counts. At the table, Grant pushed warm cinnamon rolls toward him. I talked to Fairhaven PD. The girls are stable. Evie, the younger one, exposure, sprained ankle, but they're both going to be okay. Severely dehydrated, malnourished. Tied to that tree for over a day, maybe longer. Grant paused. The FBI's here. National news, Caleb. Caleb closed his eyes, the image of their chafed wrists searing his mind. You saved their lives, Caleb. I didn't do it for headlines, Caleb said quietly. I know. That's what makes it matter. Grant leaned forward. Listen, these people. Sophisticated, professional, brutal. We've got patrols searching the woods, but no sign of that guy you saw. Could be long gone, or he could be local lying low. Be careful, Caleb. The silence stretched. There's more, Grant said. Their mother. She's coming here. Aurora Lane herself. Chartered a jet. Should be here by noon. Caleb was stunned. Aurora Lane, the enigmatic tech billionaire, vanished from public view after her husband Daniel's sudden tragic death 2 years ago. Rumors swirled depression lawsuits, a fortress-like estate. And now she was coming to his town, to meet the man who found her children. By noon, a palpable tension settled over Glenridge. 2 sleek, unmarked black SUVs rolled into town, their tinted windows reflecting the dusty streets. Caleb stood beside Grant outside the small health clinic where the girls stabilized, awaited their mother. He wore a clean shirt and jeans, fatigue etched into his frame. The car doors opened. Doors, Aurora Lane. Not cold or imperious. Exhausted, propelled by sheer will. Her tailored black coat hung loosely. Her dark hair was pulled back plainly. But her eyes, magnified by unshed tears, held grief fury and fragile, desperate hope. She walked past the sheriff, her heels clicking softly, approaching Caleb. She stopped, her gaze intense, searching. You're the man who found them. A statement raw with a mother's need. Yes, ma'am. Silence vibrated between them. How? How did you know the FBI, the police, they searched those woods? Her voice was low, tight. I didn't know, ma'am. Gathering firewood. I heard crying. Saw signs. Someone recent. Hurried. He didn't mention the fleeing shadow again. Not to her, not yet. Most people would have ignored it, called it in from a distance. Flat, an accusation and acknowledgement. He met her gaze. I'm not most people, ma'am. They didn't sound like they had time for most people. Her eyes flickered. Gratitude, disbelief. She nodded. I need to thank you. Properly. When this is over. No thanks needed. Just glad they're safe. She looked down, composure fracturing. Then she whispered, They asked for you. Caleb blinked. What, Eloise and Evie? At the hospital. They asked if the man who carried them, if the man with the kind eyes would come back. The truth of it sat heavy and warm in his chest. I'll come, he said, voice rough. Whenever they need me. When he stepped into the quiet clinic room minutes later, the twins lit up. Faces bruised, but eyes bright. Evie sat up, arms outstretched. Eloise offered a shy smile. Caleb knelt beside their beds, blinking back tears, a silent reassurance passing between them. Behind him, Aurora Lane watched hope creeping into her guarded expression. The next morning, fog softened Glenridge. In the modest guest cottage behind the clinic, Aurora stood at the window, tea untouched. Her daughters were alive. That truth was a stone in her chest. Heavy. Real. None of her imagined horrific endings involved Caleb Hart, a quiet carpenter from a forgotten town. Eloise clutched a small wooden bird Caleb had given her. Evie whispered, He'll come back, won't he, Mommy? Mr. Caleb Aurora didn't know how to answer, torn between gratitude and ingrained mistrust. Later, Sheriff Grant and Mason Kroll, her longtime legal counsel, waited. Mason Crisp, in his charcoal suit, said, Secure transport back to Fairhaven, Aurora. The press is a nightmare. Safer at the estate. I've doubled security. Aurora asked, Have you spoken to Caleb Hart today? Grant was surprised. Not since yesterday. Why? I want to speak with him. Privately. Mason hesitated. Aurora, I understand gratitude a substantial reward, but this isn't just gratitude, Mason. This is about understanding something I clearly don't. Caleb arrived summoned by Grant. He wore scuffed boots and a faded flannel shirt, dignity in his bearing, eyes cautious. Aurora met him on the cottage's back porch. Sunlight burned off the mist. Thank you for coming, Mr. Hart. Caleb, please. I told the girls I would. I meant for me, she clarified. They sat on an old wooden bench. I need to understand why you risked it all. Caleb's jaw tensed. Wasn't thinking about who they were, ma'am, or what they might mean. Thinking about what kind of man I'd be if I didn't. He met her gaze. They were children, hurt, alone, nothing else to do. Aurora studied him. Most people would have called, waited. A shadow crossed his face. Waiting for someone else to act doesn't always end well. Sometimes it's too late. A quiet finality. His eyes tightened. He'd briefly mentioned to Sheriff Grant years ago that the gantry construction project Claire had briefly consulted for before her accident had seemed off. Daniel Lane Aurora's husband had been the major investor. Claire had noticed discrepancies, mentioned them to Caleb, sounding worried. Then the accident. He tried to follow up, but the official report was airtight. A local official connected to gantry had overseen it. The thought a cold splinter had never left him. Her own eyes softened slightly. You've lost someone. He nodded. My wife, Claire, 6 years ago. Car accident. He paused. Or so they said. The last words were a ghost of doubt. I'm so sorry, Caleb. She was brave, he continued. Showed up every day, for everyone. Aurora looked away. I lost my husband too. 2 years ago. Sudden heart attack. Or that's the official story. She hadn't realized the echo of Caleb's doubt in her own words. Daniel had been worried too just before he died, about betrayal from within Lane Industries, mentioning some older project, Gantry, that kept coming up in financial irregularities. She'd dismissed it as stress. Caleb gave a respectful, understanding silence. He looked at her, a deep knowing in his eyes. Official stories. They don't always tell the whole truth, do they? Inside, Eloise peeked through the curtain. Her mother and Mr. Caleb were talking. He smiled. Her mother not quite smiling, but her face softer. Evie, she whispered. They're outside. Talking. Fighting like Mommy and Mr. Mason know. I think they're being nice. Back on the porch, Aurora said, When I first saw you, I thought you were just small town, simple. Caleb chuckled. Not the first to make that mistake. He paused. Why didn't you ask more about who took them evidence boot prints? Sheriff Grant and the FBI are handling that. You focused on the girls. That told me more. Her gaze drifted. I'm not used to people doing things without an agenda, Caleb. Maybe this town's a little old-fashioned that way. Aurora exhaled. I don't know how to thank you. There isn't enough money. You already did. With your trust, letting me see them again. He stood to leave. Caleb. Aurora called out hesitant. He turned back. Would you stay for dinner with the girls here? I think they'd like that. A faint flush. You absolutely don't have to. He studied her. A slow, genuine smile spread. I'd like that too, Aurora. That night, Caleb sat at a small dinner table between two giggling girls, asking about the woods and Nathan. Across sat a woman who the world said hadn't truly smiled in years, but now looked like she might remember how. For the first time in a long, long time, Caleb felt he belonged. The scent of cornbread filled Caleb's cabin. Nathan peeked into the oven. How long is a little long enough to build character? Caleb replied. A sleek black SUV rumbled up. Nathan dashed to the window. Is that Then Caleb's heart quickened. Looks like it. Aurora stepped out, followed by Eloise and Evie clutching paper bags beaming. Aurora lingered scanning the yard. Unruly vegetable patch stacked firewood his workshop. Alien territory. Come on in, Caleb said. Eloise and Evie darted inside, greeting Nathan. Aurora followed her gaze, absorbing the simple space. Wood-paneled walls, mismatched chairs, a stone fireplace. Not just cornbread and stew, but honest, labor-worn, leather-aged wood. She exhaled. You have a lovely place, Caleb. Not much, but it's home. Dinner was chaotic delight. Children passed cornbread, giggled over hot stew renamed Hank the Old Mutt. Aurora laughed a genuine burst when Nathan declared spilled stew a tactical gravy strike. She hadn't laughed like that since before Daniel died. After dinner, Caleb offered Aurora a tour of his workshop. Sawdust floated like gold in the evening light. She ran fingers along a half-finished rocking chair. Did you build all this, most of it? He lifted a piece of oak. For Mrs. Whitmore. Lost her husband. Said the silence is too loud. So you made her a chair, the simplicity, the empathy. Figured if she's to sit in quiet, might as well be in something beautiful. Solid. Aurora's hand paused. It's just, I've spent so long, Caleb, in places where nothing was built to last. Only to impress. He half smiled. This town's different. Slow work, sturdy craftsmanship, Sunday pie. She laughed softly, like a fairy tale. No, not a fairy tale, Aurora. Just a life. A real one. They returned to find the children on the couch, mesmerized by an old western. Eloise's head on Nathan's shoulder. Evie clutched Caleb's carved bird. Aurora's heart twisted. No money, no guards had made them feel as safe as this couch, this man's kindness. Caleb handed her chamomile tea. Do you miss her very much? She asked softly. Every day. But I honor her presence. In how I raise Nathan, how I show up. Aurora absorbed his words. Sounds exhausting. It's work. Good kind. Builds things that last. Later, as Aurora bundled the sleepy girls into the SUV, Evie whispered, Don't forget us, Mr. Caleb. Never. Next time, peach pie. Aurora smiled a genuine new expression. As the SUV pulled away, she saw Caleb in the rear view, silhouetted by the porch light, his hand raised in a quiet farewell. That night, Eloise asked sleepily, Mommy, can we live here in Glenridge? Aurora smoothed her hair. Maybe, sweet girl. A new longing stirred belonging. The next morning, the sky was heavy gray. Aurora felt watched. Her phone vibrated. Mason urgent. A cold dread. Mason waited in an SUV engine, idling face grim. He handed her a manila folder, company emails, financial records, and investigators' report. What is this? Mason's gaze was fixed ahead. David Mercer organized your security rotation. After Daniel died, transferred 6 figures to a Cayman account 2 days before the girls were taken. Her mouth went dry. David, he was Daniel's closest associate. He helped me through everything. Betrayal sickened her. Mercer, a friend, had handled security upgrades, press her children's travel. He had sold them. Does Caleb Hart know? Number Mason's tone was firm, protective, with a cold edge. And he doesn't need to. This is our world, our fight. Don't drag him in. You owe him gratitude, a reward. Not your life story, your secrets. Be careful, Aurora. You're vulnerable. Something bristled in Aurora. Vulnerable, yes. But seeing clearly. That afternoon, she found Caleb loading cedar into his pickup. Sleeves rolled sawdust on strong forearms, dirt on his temple. Preparing to build an ark, Caleb, he smiled, surprised. Might be. Town floods sometimes. He nodded to a bench. Minute they sat. Spoke to Mason. Caleb nodded. Girls okay? No. But we will be. She wanted to tell him about Mercer the betrayal, but Mason's warning echoed. Just wanted to say thank you again, not just for saving them, for what comes after. Caleb looked puzzled. After? They smile now, genuinely. Sleep through the night. That didn't happen before you. He looked down, humbled. Maybe they needed to know someone would come. So did I, she said softly. Sensing her unease or his own, she changed subjects. Could I see your workshop again? Order something, a bed? A proper sturdy bed. The workshop scented with cedar and linseed oil. Caleb pulled a sheet off a nearly finished headboard, intricate hand-carved ivy leaves. Beautiful, Caleb. A shadow. Started this, after Claire passed. Never finished. Why not? He shrugged. Didn't know if I'd ever build a proper home again. She turned to him, and now he looked at her eyes, serious yet soft. Now I'm not so sure I ever really stopped trying. Back at the clinic, danger unseen. A man in a dark sedan observed the guest cottage through binoculars. Phone buzz. A clipped, synthesized voice. She's getting too comfortable. Remind her what she stands to lose. Who's in control? He smiled coldly, disconnected. That evening, Aurora placed a small, rougher wooden bird, Nathan's work on the windowsill. She didn't notice the shadow across the street, the faint chemical smell near the trash, or the camera lens recording her. The next morning, Mason burst in, face ashen, phone out. Aurora security breach. Significant. Blood to ice. What kind images? Encrypted site, dark web, photos, long lens, girls playing. You. With heart. Candid. Someone's watching. They want you to know. The floor shifted. The enemy hadn't retreated, just stepped back, circling closer, more menacing. The wind changed that night, an uneasy premonition. Trees outside the clinic guest cottage swayed restlessly. Crickets fell ominously quiet. Caleb, miles away in his cabin, couldn't sleep. A visceral ache, an echo of the night he lost Claire, clawed at him. He stepped onto his porch, watching shadows contort. The moon, high but muted by gathering clouds, offered little comfort. He listened not for sounds, but for the unnatural quiet before disaster. A low guttural rumble, then far off towards town, a horrifying flash of vivid, hungry orange painted the underside of the clouds. His breath caught. The cottage, Aurora and the girls. Fire. He bolted off the porch. Keys on the kitchen counter. No time. He simply ran. Boots pounded unyielding earth. Lungs burned. Legs pumped, cutting through darkness, treacherous shortcuts. 100 agonizing yards away, he heard the first scream. Evie's distinct, terrified cry, then Eloise's sharp, panicked. Then an awful, choked silence. Flames, vivid and monstrous, clawed at the cottage windows, licking the wooden roof with insatiable orange tongues. Thick, black smoke billowed. A small, horrified crowd gathered, voices rising in useless panic, paralyzed by the inferno's intensity. Not until Caleb burst from the tree line. No hesitation. He ripped off his flannel shirt, wrapping it crudely around his mouth and nose, against the acrid smoke, and charged headlong through the weakening front door, which splintered inward under his desperate shoulder. Heat slammed into him like a physical wall, stealing his breath. The air thick, toxic, choking, filled with the terrifying crackle and roar of the blaze. Eloise, Evie, he shouted, voice hoarse, dropping low, crawling blindly beneath the suffocating smoke. Debris rained down. A support beam in the main room groaned like a dying beast, engulfed in orange, and crashed where he'd stood seconds before. He smelled accelerant, not just wood burning, but something chemical, fiercely fueling the blaze. This was no accident. A small, terrified voice called back, barely audible. "Here, Mr. Caleb. In here." He found them huddled behind a toppled dresser in their small bedroom, coughing violently, faces streaked with soot and terror. The room was an inferno, the heat unbearable. Part of the ceiling sagged precariously, raining sparks. He had seconds. He gathered them both into his arms, their small bodies trembling. "Close your eyes, girls," he commanded, projecting calm he didn't feel. "Hold on tight. We're going home." As he turned to escape, the main escape route was suddenly blocked by a curtain of falling flaming debris. Trapped. The bedroom window was too high, too small. He scanned desperately. A smaller adjoining bathroom, its door flimsy, already smoldering. He kicked it open. Smoke poured in, but beyond it, another window possibly leading to the back. Coughing eyes stinging, he plunged through the girls, clutched tight. The bathroom window was boarded up from the outside. Damn it. He spun back to the main bedroom door, now mostly consumed by fire. He could hear the screams of the crowd outside, distant and muffled. His lungs burned vision, swimming a roaring in his ears that wasn't just the fire. "Claire, give me strength. Nathan needs me." He charged shoulder first at the burning remains of the doorway, a primal roar ripping from his own throat. The wood weakened, gave way. He stumbled out, flames licking at his back, his left arm searing with pain as he shielded the girls from a shower of falling embers. The hallway was a tunnel of fire. He kept going, fueled by pure adrenaline and love. He burst out the front door, now a gaping, fiery maw, and onto the relative safety of the grass, dropping to his knees, shielding the girls until strong hands dragged them further back. The girls coughed violently, but they were safe. Alive. Caleb wasn't so lucky. His left arm from wrist to shoulder was blistered, blackened, excruciatingly raw. Breathing shallow, ragged, eyes glazed. A nurse shouted for an ambulance. He barely heard thoughts, only on the children. Aurora arrived 5 minutes later, alerted by Grant. Barefoot in nightclothes, face a mask of terror. She skidded to a halt beside the girls, tended by paramedics, tears streaming as she frantically checked them. Then she turned to Caleb. On a stretcher, oxygen mask on, eyes fluttering weakly. She knelt, shaking. You went in there," she whispered, awe and horror in her voice. "The whole place was—" "They were crying," he rasped. "Couldn't not go. You could have died, Caleb." Her voice broke. A weak, lopsided smile. "Better me than them, Aurora." Tears slid unchecked. "Don't say that." He drifted out of consciousness. The county hospital's burn unit. Oxygen vs pain management. The doctor said he'd likely keep full function, but scarring would be significant. Aurora stayed beside him, a silent vigil. Wiped his brow, adjusted his blanket, whispered reassurances. "You're not alone, Caleb. I'm here." The girls brought hand-drawn cards. Nathan, face mixed with fear and pride, hugged his father, handing him a clumsy wooden bird. Caleb laughed, wheezed, winced. 3 days later, Sheriff Grant sat opposite Aurora in the hospital cafeteria. Intentional Aurora, accelerant, forcible entry, professional. Aurora knotted lips, a thin line. She'd known. Mercer, or whoever he's working for, Grant asked. She stared into her coffee. "Someone who wanted me broken. Failing to kill my girls, then trying to eliminate us. That just made me angrier. More determined. A miscalculation. Gonna tell Caleb about Mercer. The threat, not yet. He's done enough saving. Now, it's my turn." That night, she stepped into Caleb's dim room with a small book. She sat beside his bed. He looked over. "What's that?" "My journal. Haven't written since Daniel died. But last night I needed to." "Good," he murmured. "A start. I wrote about you, Caleb." His lips quirked. "Hope you left out the part where I passed out." She chuckled softly, brushing hair from his forehead. "I wrote," she whispered, voice thick, "that I didn't know if I could trust anyone again. Until someone Ran into a wall of fire for my children, no armor, no agenda, no hesitation. Caleb turned his head fully, eyes clear-focused. You can, Aurora. Trust again. You just have to choose to. She didn't answer. Reached down, took his uninjured hand. He held on. Rain painted abstract rivers on the hospital windows. Caleb slept. On the tray beside his bed lay a worn, leather-bound journal. Aurora picked it up. Pages filled with strong masculine script. Letters to Claire, dated beginning 6 years ago. Raw grief, then reflective sorrow, then cherished memory. October 12th. Taught Nathan to fish Claire. You would have praised him like he'd landed a whale. March 5th. Built another rocking chair. Still hear your voice saying it wobbles. It probably does. July 22nd. Some days I still expect to hear your voice. I keep going, Claire. I hope that's what you'd want. September 10th. Just before the girls were found, Nathan said the woods near the ridge feel sad. Asked if trees remember. Told him I thought they remembered everything. Maybe that's why I go there. Close to you. Then an entry that made Aurora's blood run cold. Daniel Lane died today. Heart attack, they say. Rich man. Makes you wonder, Claire. Remember the gantry project you were consulting found those financial holes, those hushed-up safety violations? Daniel Lane was the big backer. You were worried. Said someone powerful involved with gantry was trying to cover things up. Then the accident. That local official Barstow, the one tied to gantry, he closed your case so fast. Sweet Lord Claire, were you silenced? Aurora's hand flew to her mouth. The gantry project. Daniel had mentioned it with concern before his death linked to internal corruption. Claire Hart, Caleb's wife, had been looking into it. Her death wasn't an accident, and Daniel's heart attack suddenly felt far less certain. The men who took her daughters the fire. This was deeper, older, more venomous than she imagined. It tied her present horror to Caleb's deepest pain. The official reports, lies. She closed the journal, pressing it to her chest. He hadn't just learned to live with absence. He honored it and created space for others to heal. That afternoon, Caleb woke to her voice, reading from her own journal. Now I'm starting to think you just learned to live with fear like an unwelcome shadow, and you choose to love and live anyway. Caleb rasped a weak grin. You stole my journal. She held it up, smiling. Guilty. But after you running into a burning building, we're probably even. Worth the snooping. She nodded, eyes bright. More than you know, Caleb. A comfortable quiet. The storm eased. You don't have to keep running, Aurora. She shook her head. Not sure I remember how to stay. Starts with breathing. One breath, one choice. She swallowed. I think I want to try. 2 days later, he was discharged. Nathan waited, grinning, with a welcome back, Dad, you're our hero banner. Aurora arrived with Eloise and Evie clutching wrapped bags. What's all this? Caleb asked, arm in a sling in his cabin. Evie held out her bag. Dinner, lasagna, Mommy helped, and drawings, Eloise added. Of you being brave, Aurora smiled hesitantly. Only if you're up to it. He smiled. For lasagna made by my favorite girls, always. That night, the five sat at Caleb's table eating lasagna off mismatched plates. Nathan taught the girls paper frogs. Aurora watched a dream she desperately wanted. Later on the porch, Aurora murmured, stars are incredibly bright. Always are after a good rain. Silence, hope, home. She turned to him, voice raw. When Daniel died, I locked everything down. Convinced myself I had to become steel. Caleb listened. But lately, since you, I felt cracks in that steel, and I'm not afraid. He nodded. Maybe, Aurora, the cracks are where the light finally gets in. She smiled. Sounds like something Claire might have written. A faint flush on his cheeks. She was always the best part of me. Aurora asked, what would she think of all this, of me being here? Caleb's gaze full gentle. She'd say not to waste a single second. Life's too short, too precious for anything less than grabbing happiness when it shows up unexpected. Inside, Eloise whispered to Evie, "Think Mommy. Loves Mr. Caleb." Evie yawned. Dunno about loves yet, but Mommy's heart is learning to be soft again. Good start. Out on the porch, two people, damaged, decent, real, stood together. Not lovers. Not yet. Something tender, fragile, resilient had bloomed, watered by courage and vulnerability. Neither felt like running. Caleb watched Nathan and the twins race through the tall grass, laughter like wind chimes, a profound belonging to them, and to Aurora, who now looked at him with hope. Familiar footsteps. "Aurora," he said warmly. She joined him, a hand-knitted scarf against the autumn wind hair loose. "You always know." He chuckled. "You walk like someone once chased. Fast, quiet, alert." She smiled sadly. "I suppose I was." She paused. "Caleb, what you wrote in your journal about Claire? About the Gantry project? Daniel mentioned it too before he died. He was worried about something big, someone corrupt inside his company using Gantry to launder money, cover up safety issues. He never got to the bottom of it." Caleb went still. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Claire, Daniel, both gone. Both knew too much about Gantry. The local official who signed off on Claire's accident report, Barstow. Caleb set his voice tight. He had ties to Gantry. I always suspected but had no proof. Aurora's eyes widened with dawning horror. Mercer managed the Gantry account for Daniel for a while, before he was promoted to head of my security. The implications were monstrous. This wasn't just a kidnapping for ransom. This was a deep, festering conspiracy that had already claimed 2 lives and now threatened theirs. "Mason's coming this afternoon," Aurora said, voice tinged with weariness, the earlier conversation now heavy with this new shared dread. "Bringing a team, more security legal advisors, insisting we return to Fairhaven. They believe Mercer isn't working alone, and there's a significant lead on his accomplice from Fairhaven." Caleb looked at her. "And what do you believe, Aurora?" "I believe," she whispered, "my daughters are safest, happiest themselves, laughing barefoot in your field." "Not quite secure, Aurora." "No. Infinitely better." Mason Kroll arrived, sleek SUV slicing through the quiet road, a harbinger of unwelcome realities. He was flanked by 2 formal assistants and a new heavily built security operative with an earpiece. He strode onto the porch. Aurora a curt nod. Then to Caleb, "Mr. Hart, cool professional. We've secured Fairhaven. Military-grade surveillance, constant protection." Mason paused, and then his voice sharpened as he saw the way Aurora now looked at Caleb, the ease between them. "I've also had my own people looking into Gantry. Turns out David Mercer wasn't just an opportunist kidnapper. He was a key player in siphoning funds through that project for years. Daniel was getting too close. Claire Hart, through her consulting, stumbled onto it too. Mercer arranged their accidents. His accomplice, the one the FBI are closing in on in Fairhaven, helped him from the inside." Aurora felt a chill. "Who?" Mason's lips twisted into something resembling a smile, but it was cold, predatory. "Someone you'd never suspect. But first things first. For the girl's absolute safety and yours, you must return to Fairhaven. Immediately. This rustic charm, Caleb, it's not equipped for what's coming if Mercer's desperate." Caleb's gut churned. Something felt wrong. Mason's insistence, the new operative, whose eyes never seemed to rest, always scanning like a hunter. "Caleb, why don't you show Mr. Thorne here?" Mason said, gesturing to the silent operative. "Your workshop. He's interested in your craftsmanship, specialized security modifications, perhaps?" Thorne's eyes met Caleb's, and there was no interest in craftsmanship there, only a chilling appraisal. Caleb's mind raced. A trap. He nodded slowly. "All right. Aurora, why don't you and the girls stay in the cabin? Nathan, keep them company." In the workshop, the scent of cedar and oiled tools, usually a comfort, now felt like a cage. Thorne moved with a predatory grace, his eyes missing nothing. "Impressive." Thorne set his voice flat as he examined a sturdy workbench. "Solid." Suddenly, the workshop door slammed shut. Mason stood there, a small, high-tech pistol in his hand, no longer the solicitous lawyer, but a man transformed, his face a mask of cold fury and desperate resolve. "I'm afraid the Fairhaven lead was a dead end, Aurora," he said, his voice silky, turning to her as she appeared at the workshop window drawn by the slam. "But this little detour to Glen Ridge, quite fruitful." David Mercer stepped out from behind a stack of lumber, a grim smile on his face. Thorne Mason's operative now stood by Mercer's side. He wasn't Kroll's man. He was Mercer's. "Mason," Aurora whispered, her face white with shock and betrayal. "But you helped me all these years." "Helped myself mostly," Mason sneered. "Daniel was a fool. Left too many loose ends, especially with Gantry. Claire Hart got too curious, had to be silenced. Daniel got too close to figuring out my involvement with Mercer and Gantry. His heart attack was convenient. And you, Aurora, so lost in your grief, you were easy to manage. Until he showed up." Mason jerked his chin at Caleb. Mercer stepped forward. "We're not leaving empty-handed this time. The girls, now." Caleb moved. He kicked a stack of newly cut planks, sending them cascading towards Mercer, a momentary diversion. He lunged for a heavy iron pry bar leaning against his lathe. "Aurora, get the girls, run to the ridge signal for help." Thorne moved to intercept Caleb, fast and brutal. Caleb swung the pry bar, deflecting a blow, the clang of metal echoing. Aurora screamed Nathan's name. Mercer was already heading for the cabin. A gunshot exploded. Mason had fired a warning shot into the ceiling. "Don't be foolish, Caleb. It's over." But Nathan, seeing Mercer approach the cabin, had acted. He'd grabbed the old hunting rifle Caleb kept locked away, rarely touched. He wasn't aiming to hit, just to scare. The crack of the rifle from the cabin porch, though wild, made Mercer pause. Caleb used the distraction. He brought the pry bar down hard on Thorne's extended arm. A sickening crunch. Thorne roared in pain. Caleb didn't wait. He tackled Mason, sending them both sprawling amongst wood shavings and tools. The pistol skittered away. Aurora, seeing her chance, grabbed a heavy mallet from Caleb's workbench and brought it down on Mercer's arm as he reached for the cabin door where Eloise and Evie now stood, terrified but defiant, holding hands. Mercer howled. Sirens wailed in the distance. Sheriff Grant, alerted by Nathan's prearranged signal, 3 quick shots if there was real trouble was coming. Mason, recovering, scrambled for the fallen pistol. Caleb quicker kicked it under a heavy saw table. Mason snarled, pulling a smaller knife from his ankle holster. He lunged at Caleb. Caleb sidestepped, catching Mason's arm, using his momentum to slam him against a wall of stacked lumber. Wood toppled, burying Mason momentarily. Thorne, arm useless, was trying to get to his feet. Mercer, clutching his injured arm, saw Grant's cruiser fishtailing up the drive. He made a break for the woods. "Not so fast," Caleb growled, cutting him off, pry bar raised. Sheriff Grant and 2 deputies burst in, weapons drawn. "Drop it, Mercer Kroll, don't even think about it." It was over. Mason, disheveled and defeated, was cuffed. Mercer, snarling, was apprehended. Thorne was groaning on the floor. Aurora rushed to the girls, gathering them into a fierce embrace. Nathan stood by, rifle still held, shaking but resolute. Caleb leaned against his workbench, breath-ragged pry bar still in hand. He looked at Aurora, at the children. They were safe. Mason Kroll, the trusted friend, the legal eagle, the man who'd orchestrated her life for 2 years, was the ultimate betrayer. Driven by greed, fear of exposure from his and Mercer's long-running gantry scheme that Claire Hart and Daniel Lane had separately started to uncover, he'd masterminded the kidnapping, used Mercer, and planned to eliminate Aurora and the girls once he had control of her assets, framing Mercer for it all. Caleb's intervention had ruined his initial plan. The fire was a desperate second attempt. This was his last mad gamble. Later, after the chaos subsided and Mason and Mercer were gone, Aurora found Caleb sitting on the porch, head in his hands. She sat beside him. He used my trust, my grief. Against me, Caleb, Claire, Daniel, because of him, because of gantry. Caleb looked at her, his eyes filled with a shared pain. We know the truth now, Aurora, and they'll pay for it. In the following weeks, the full extent of Mason Kroll's and David Mercer's crimes unfolded. The gantry scandal, the embezzlement, the murders of Claire Hart and Daniel Lane, disguised as accidents, the kidnapping, the arson. The evidence was overwhelming. A news report snippet showed Mason looking gaunt and broken, being led into a courtroom. His confession implicated a network that went further than they imagined, but the core players were caught. Justice, slow but inexorable, was coming. Caleb stood at the edge of the sun-drenched field behind his cabin. Nathan and the twins raced through the grass. Laughter like wind chimes. Aurora joined him. Mason's plea deal means he'll testify against the others in the gantry network, she said. He'll be in prison for the rest of his life. Mercer, too. It's an ending. And a beginning, Caleb said. She took his hand. My old life. I think I was living such a big life, Caleb. Important. Powerful. Now I know it was just incredibly loud. That afternoon, she made the call. I'm resigning, Mason, she'd said into the prison phone line where her former lawyer now sat. But she wasn't talking to him. She was speaking to the world. She sold her shares, transferred the Lane Foundation. Tech Titan quits, the headline screamed. In Glenridge, life didn't change. Nathan fed Hank scraps. Eloise tied lavender ribbons. Evie insisted on grace. Aurora drank coffee on the porch. Peace. One crisp evening, Caleb watched Aurora admire a newly finished dining table in his workshop. You didn't have to. I know. Wanted to. She breathed in cedar and beeswax. I used to be someone people couldn't reach. You didn't try to scale the walls. You just waited outside with decent coffee until I decided to open the door. Caleb smiled. She stepped closer. Do people like us, Caleb? Get a second chance? People like us, Aurora, who've walked through fire. Get to choose which life they finally stay awake for. Later, by a fire pit, children roasting marshmallows, Aurora sat beside him. I don't have much, Aurora, but what I do have, my hands, my home, my son, my heart, I'd like to share them. With all of you, if you still want them. She turned, eyes full. I don't need the world, Caleb. I just need somewhere, someone that feels like it won't disappear when I finally exhale. Caleb smiled. Then stay, Aurora. Just stay. She threaded her fingers through his, leaned into his strength. She walked into love step by intentional step. The next morning, Caleb found a note by the coffee pot. Dearest Caleb, all I ever needed was a quiet, stubborn man who patiently builds beautiful chairs for grieving widows and teaches hopeful little kids how to wait for the fish to bite. Let's build a life, Caleb. Our life. From scratch. Together, he tucked it into his shirt pocket. Outside, Aurora laughed as Nathan showed her how to plant tomatoes. For the first time, Caleb Hart felt undeniably, irrevocably chosen. The bench. 3 sturdy planks of weathered oak sanded smooth beneath 2 majestic pines overlooking the valley. Where he'd first seen the Lane girls laugh. Where Aurora stood uncertain. Where their lives intertwined. Today it meant something new. Glenridge turned out. Not invited, just new. Word spread. Caleb carving a dedication. Aurora there in a sweater and jeans. The ceremony was simple. Caleb stood by the bench holding a hand-carved wooden sign. Sheriff Grant emotional. Nathan, Eloise, and Evie. The girls ran up tied fresh lavender ribbons to Caleb's remaining free wrist. "You're officially official now," Mr. Caleb, Evie declared. Caleb grinned. "Guess I better behave." Aurora stepped forward, eyes damp glowing. "Thank you for making us feel like we belonged before we even knew if we wanted to." Jedediah Smith from the hardware store called out, "Just what we do in Glenridge, Aurora." "We look out for our own," Caleb knelt, attaching the plaque. "For the hearts that were once afraid, and for the hands that held them steadfast and gentle anyway." Not a dry eye. Lemonade and pies appeared. Picnic blankets. Timmy Evans strummed a guitar. Aurora sat on the bench, sun on her face, peace radiating. She reached for Caleb's hand. Later, the 5 stayed. Children built a stick castle. Aurora and Caleb on the bench, fingers intertwined. Legacy, Aurora said softly. "I thought it was buildings' foundations. Now." Whispered bedtime stories, scraped knees, shared pies. Showing up day after day. Because it matters. Caleb kissed her head. "Sounds like you figured it out, almost. Just one tiny part I'm still working on." "What's that?" She turned, eyes luminous. "How to properly thank someone who taught me how to be human again." Caleb's throat tightened. Reached into his jacket, pulled out a folded, faded blue notepaper. "What's that? A letter. Wrote it last year. To Claire." Aurora froze. "Your wife." He nodded. "Wrote it the day I finished her rocking chair. Never mailed it. Thought today is the right day to let it go." She watched as he walked to the overlook, unfolded the letter, read it silently, then released it. It caught the breeze spiraling over the valley, returning his face serene. "What did it say, Caleb?" He smiled soft, sure peaceful. It said, "Thank you, my love, for teaching me how to love someone enough to bravely, achingly let her go. And more importantly, how to find the courage to love again with my whole heart when it's finally truly time." Aurora leaned in, rested her head on his shoulder. The sun slipped below the horizon. True night fell. Children sleepy in the truck, Caleb and Aurora on their bench, hands joined. Peaceful. No grand pronouncements. Just this. Just them. 2 people once broken, found by each other by themselves. Learned where and how the light always finds us. If this story, in its telling, has touched a chord within you, we would be so honored to hear from you. Please let us know in the comments below. Where in this vast, beautiful world are you watching from tonight? It is always such a profound gift to see how stories like this, stories of hope and healing, find their quiet way into hearts and homes across the globe. And if you'd like to be part of more moments like these, moments that are quiet, true, and filled with an enduring, gentle light, please feel free to subscribe to our channel. We would be truly honored to have you with us on this journey. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts for spending part of your valuable day here with us. Your time, your presence, your willingness to listen. It means more than you could ever know.